"Just do it, cowboy," the bride gasped, as he pushed her up against the cabin wall. The cabin sat at the edge of the forest, small and weathered, with smoke curling lazily from the chimney. It had been his grandmother's once, and now it was his escape from the world. For as long as he could remember, the cowboy had loved the quiet of this place. The way the wind whispered through the trees, the way the snow in winter muffled all sound. He liked it better than people, better than crowds, better than the noise of life. Yet tonight, the quiet felt different. Tonight, the cabin seemed almost alive, waiting, watching. She stood by the doorway, her hand resting lightly on the wooden frame. The bride looked different than she had just a few hours ago, during the whirlwind ceremony. The dress that had seemed to sparkle in the sunlight now felt heavy on her shoulders. Her hair had come loose from the careful braid, falling in soft waves that framed her face. She seemed smaller somehow, not in body but in expression, as though the reality of what she had done, the reality of marrying him, was just sinking in. He watched her from across the room, leaning against the edge of the counter, hands tucked in his pockets. Normally he wasn't one for words, but tonight he felt a strange need to speak. Yet every time he opened his mouth, nothing came out. Words, he realized, could never capture everything he felt. And yet he wanted her to know. He wanted her to feel the honesty behind the silence. "You okay?" he finally asked, his voice low, a little rough, but soft enough to invite trust. She turned, a small smile forming, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I think so," she said, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. It's a lot, isn't it?" All of this, all at once.
He nodded.
"It is." The words were simple, but they carried weight. She nodded slowly, moving a little closer, her bare feet soft against the wooden floor. She didn't touch him, not yet, but her presence was enough to make him notice everything. How she smelled faintly of pine and lavender, how her eyes reflected the firelight in the hearth, how her hands trembled slightly when she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The fire crackled, filling the room with a warmth that didn't exist in the air outside. Snow had begun to fall again, dusting the cabin's roof in a soft blanket of white. He loved this time of year, the way the world seemed paused under the snow, as if giving people a chance to stop, reflect, and breathe. He glanced at her again, seeing her shiver slightly despite the warmth of the room. "You cold?" he asked, moving toward the closet. She shook her head. He didn't believe her and grabbed a blanket, tossing it gently over her shoulders. She looked surprised, then grateful, as the soft wool settled around her. She wrapped it tightly, drawing it close, as if it could hold her together through the night. "You always carry a blanket?" she asked, a hint of humor in her voice, trying to ease the tension. He shrugged. "You never know when you'll need one." His lips quirked in a small smile, but the eyes remained serious, thoughtful. She laughed softly, a sound that seemed to make the room lighter, though a heaviness lingered still. They moved toward the window together, drawn by the view of the snow-covered landscape. The trees were heavy with snow, their branches bending gently under the weight. Beyond them, the mountains loomed in the distance, dark and silent. She rested her hands on the glass, watching the snow swirl like tiny dancers in the cold wind. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He didn't answer right away. Beauty was something he rarely spoke of. For him, beauty wasn't in grand gestures or shiny things. It was in quiet moments like this, in the way someone could stand beside you and watch the world without saying a word, in the way trust could be felt in the small acts that didn't demand anything in return. She turned to him then, a question in her eyes. "Do you ever think about the future?" He hesitated. The future was something he rarely considered. His life had been simple, predictable in its own way. But tonight was different. Tonight had changed everything. "I try not to," he admitted. "I like to take things as they come." She studied him, a mixture of curiosity and concern on her face. "I guess that's part of why I like you. You're steady, even when everything else is chaotic. Even when I feel like I might be losing my mind, you're calm." He didn't respond immediately. He wanted to, but the words seemed inadequate. How could he explain the way he felt? How could anyone explain the quiet force that keeps two people tethered together, even when the world shifts beneath them? Instead, he reached for her hand, gently, letting his fingers brush against hers. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let him hold her hand, as if silently agreeing that this was enough, for now. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows and making the cabin groan in protest. She shivered again, this time closer to him, leaning slightly against his shoulder. He felt the weight of her presence, not as a burden, but as a reminder that life had changed forever. There would be responsibilities, expectations, and challenges ahead, but for this moment, it was enough just to be together. They moved to the old couch near the fireplace, settling down in silence. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, feeling the warmth of her body, the steady heartbeat beneath his arm. The firelight danced across their faces, casting flickering shadows that seemed to mirror the uncertainty and excitement swirling inside both of them. Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours. The snow continued to fall, thick and silent, transforming the world outside into something unrecognizable, yet comforting. They didn't speak much, and yet every glance, every touch, every small movement communicated more than words ever could. Finally, she lifted her head slightly, meeting his gaze. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. He nodded, understanding more than she realized. Fear wasn't weakness. It was the acknowledgement that life mattered, that choices mattered, and that people mattered. "I know," he said softly, "but we'll figure it out together." She smiled faintly, the tension in her shoulders easing a little. "I hope so," she murmured. He gave a small, reassuring squeeze to her hand. "We will. Just give it time." The night wore on, and the cabin seemed to breathe along with them. Outside, the world was frozen and still, but inside, two hearts were learning to beat in sync. There was no rush, no urgency, just the quiet understanding that life was moving forward, and they were moving with it, together. Hours later, they finally moved to the small bedroom, still wrapped in the same blanket. She rested against him, feeling safer than she had in days. He felt a calm settle over him, the kind that only comes from knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be. In that cabin, on that cold winter night, the bride and the cowboy learned something important. That love wasn't just about grand gestures or passionate moments. It was about patience, understanding, and the willingness to face fears together. And for the first time, they both felt ready to try. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. Inside, two people had found a quiet beginning to what would surely be a lifetime of challenges, joys, and shared moments. And as they drifted into sleep, the cabin held them gently, a silent witness to the start of their journey together. The morning light seeped gently through the small cabin windows, casting a golden glow on the wooden floor. Snowflakes still clung to the roof outside, melting slowly as the sun warmed them. The bride stirred first, blinking against the soft light. She felt the warmth of the blanket draped around her, and for a moment the world outside seemed far away. She could hear the faint crackle of the fire and the steady breathing of the cowboy beside her, which somehow grounded her. She had spent the night thinking about everything that had led them here, how quickly life could change, how fragile comfort was, and how terrifying yet beautiful it was to trust someone completely. He stirred slightly, shifting closer without waking fully, and she allowed herself to watch him for a moment. There was a calmness about him in the early morning, a stillness that reminded her why she had chosen him. Breakfast was quiet. They worked together in the small kitchen, preparing simple coffee and toast. There was no hurry, no need to rush. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with small, unspoken understandings. Sometimes she would glance at him, and he would meet her gaze briefly before returning to his tasks. That small acknowledgement was enough to remind her that they were in this together, facing life as partners. "Do you want to go outside later?" he asked, finally breaking the silence. His voice was soft, but there was a hint of excitement underneath, as though he wanted to share something special with her. She smiled, brushing her hair behind her ear. Yes, I want to see everything covered in snow.
I've never been in a place like this.
He nodded, pleased, and for a moment the weight of the past and the fear of the unknown seemed lighter. They finished breakfast slowly, enjoying the simple act of preparing food together. It was ordinary, but ordinary felt precious when it was shared with someone who understood you. Later they stepped outside, the snow crunching beneath their boots. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of pine. The bride marveled at the way the sunlight danced on the snow, making it glitter like tiny diamonds. She laughed softly as she kicked at a patch of snow, sending a flurry into the air. He watched her, a quiet smile on his face, enjoying her wonder and joy. "Be careful," he said, though there was no real danger. His voice carried concern but also a hint of admiration. She turned to him, brushing snow from her coat. "I'm fine." "Don't worry so much," she teased lightly, though she appreciated his caution. As they walked through the snowy trees, the cowboy told her stories of his childhood. He spoke of long days on the ranch, the lessons he had learned from his father, and the quiet moments spent alone in the fields. She listened intently, fascinated by the life he had led. There was a simplicity to it, but also a depth that made her realize how strong and resilient he was. In turn, she shared pieces of her life with him. Her childhood memories, her dreams, the challenges she had faced, and the moments that had shaped her into the person she was. He listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, asking questions that showed he cared. The exchange was slow, careful, and intimate. Even without physical closeness, it was a reminder that love was also about knowing someone completely, their fears, their hopes, their quiet thoughts. As they reached a small clearing, the sun now higher in the sky, they stopped. The snow stretched out around them like a vast, untouched world. The bride took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs. She turned to him, her eyes shining. "It's beautiful," she said again, but this time her voice carried awe and gratitude. He nodded, his expression softening. "It's better when you're here." For a long time they stood silently, taking in the view. The snow had a way of muffling sound, creating a peaceful stillness that made everything else fade. She felt a sense of calm she hadn't known she could feel, and she realized that this moment, simple as it was already a memory she would treasure forever.
Eventually, they began walking back toward the cabin.
On the way, the bride tripped slightly over a hidden mound of snow. The cowboy caught her instantly, holding her steady. She laughed, a soft, happy sound, and he smiled, shaking his head. "You're lucky I'm quick," he said, his voice teasing but warm. She leaned on him for a moment, grateful for his strength. "I am lucky," she admitted, looking up at him. "Very lucky." Back inside the cabin, they warmed themselves by the fire. The bride poured hot chocolate, careful not to spill, and handed him a cup. He took it gratefully, their fingers brushing briefly. That small touch carried more meaning than either of them could explain. It was comfort, trust, and closeness all at once. They spent the afternoon talking, reading, and sometimes simply sitting in silence, letting the fire crackle and the snow fall outside. She watched him move around the cabin, noticing little things, the way he folded a blanket, the way he arranged the firewood, the way he seemed completely at ease in his own space. It made her feel safe, knowing that he could handle the world outside even if she couldn't. As evening approached, the sky turned shades of orange and pink, reflecting off the snow and casting a soft light into the cabin. The bride felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. She realized that fear and uncertainty were still there, but they were balanced by trust, care, and love. She felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing they were in it together. Dinner was simple, a small stew warmed on the stove. They ate slowly, enjoying the flavors and the quiet comfort of each other's company. There were no distractions, no need to impress anyone, no expectations. Just two people sharing a meal, a moment, and the knowledge that they belonged to each other now. After dinner, the cowboy suggested a walk to the small pond nearby. The ice had formed thick, strong, and smooth, reflecting the sky like a mirror. The bride hesitated, unsure if it would hold her weight, but he took her hand, guiding her carefully onto the ice. She laughed nervously, but trusted him completely. They moved slowly, testing the ice, holding hands tightly. The world around them seemed magical. The reflection of the trees, the soft orange glow of the sunset, and the sound of the wind through the branches. Danger, but because of the simple act of trusting someone completely. "See?" he said softly, noticing her smile. "It's strong. You're safe." She nodded, leaning on him slightly, feeling the warmth of his presence against the cold. "I trust you," she said quietly. The words hung between them, carrying more meaning than either could describe. It wasn't just about the moment on the ice. It was about their lives, their choices, and the bond they were forming. Trust wasn't built in a day, but tonight she felt it growing, tangible and strong. As night fell, they returned to the cabin, tired but happy. They changed into warmer clothes, settled by the fire, and shared stories from their pasts, revealing fears, mistakes, and lessons learned. Each story brought them closer, creating a sense of intimacy that was more powerful than any physical gesture could be. Later, the bride looked around the cabin, noticing the little details, the way he had stacked firewood, the small keepsakes on the shelves, the way the room felt lived in and cared for. She realized that this was a reflection of him, steady, careful, and deeply thoughtful. She felt a deep respect and admiration for him, and that respect was part of the love that was growing between them. He noticed her gaze, and for a moment the world outside seemed to disappear. "You like it?" he asked, his voice quiet but hopeful. She nodded, smiling softly. "I do, more than I thought I would." The night stretched on, filled with quiet conversation, laughter, and shared memories. They spoke of dreams for the future, not grand plans but simple hopes. Moments like this, laughter, comfort, trust, and the willingness to face challenges together. The bride realized that love wasn't just about excitement. It was about these small, everyday moments. It was about presence, attention, and care. Before bed, they sat by the fire one last time, wrapped in blankets, letting the warmth seep into their bones. The bride rested her head against his shoulder again, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. The cowboy held her gently, aware of her trust and fragile happiness. They didn't speak much, but the silence was filled with understanding, love, and the shared awareness that they were beginning a life together. Outside, the snow continued to fall, quiet and unrelenting, blanketing the world in white. Inside, two people were learning the rhythm of shared life, the small gestures, the quiet reassurances, the trust, and the comfort of knowing they had each other. And in that moment, the bride felt something she hadn't felt before. Hope. Hope that love could be patient. Hope that trust could grow. Hope that even in the quietest moments, the strongest bonds were being formed. Morning arrived quietly at the cabin, bringing with it a soft light that filtered through the frost-kissed windows. The snow outside still lay thick, covering the forest like a blanket. The bride woke first, as usual, and found herself watching him sleep. The cowboy had his arm draped over the blanket, and even in sleep he seemed steady, unshakable. She smiled faintly, feeling a mixture of comfort and curiosity. She had married this man, and yet every day she discovered something new about him. Something small, a movement, a habit, a look, that made her realize there was depth beyond the calm surface he showed to the world. She rose carefully, not wanting to disturb him, and wrapped herself in a blanket. Moving to the small window, she looked out at the snowy world. There was something magical about the silence. No birds sang, no animals stirred, just the soft snow falling and the tall trees standing like guardians. The bride felt a shiver, partly from the cold and partly from anticipation. Today they would spend more time together outside, and she didn't know exactly what he had planned, but she trusted him. When he finally woke, rubbing his eyes and stretching, she noticed a small, almost shy smile on his face. It was rare for him to smile so openly, and it made her heart beat faster. "Morning," she said softly, still wrapped in her blanket. "Morning," he replied, his voice low but warm. He paused and then added, "Did you sleep well?" "I did," she said honestly, glancing at him. "Better than I thought I would." He nodded, as if he understood more than her words could say. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the silence between them full of unspoken understanding. Then he reached for the kettle and began preparing breakfast. She watched him move with quiet confidence, admiring the simple way he handled the tasks. He didn't rush, he didn't fuss. He just did what needed to be done, and that steadiness was something she realized she relied on more than she had expected. After breakfast, he suggested a walk to the hills beyond the cabin. She quickly agreed, eager to explore more of the snow-covered forest. They bundled up in warm coats, scarves, and gloves, and stepped outside into the crisp, morning air. The sun was higher now, glinting on the snow and turning every flake into a tiny spark of light. The bride felt as though she were walking through a dream, each step soft and cushioned by the thick snow. As they walked, the cowboy told her more about his life in the mountains. He spoke about the seasons, about how he had learned to read the weather, to track animals, and to respect the forests. There was a quiet pride in his voice, not boastful, but honest. She listened carefully, fascinated. She realized that his connection to the land was more than just work. It was a part of who he was, just as much as his calm demeanor and quiet strength. In turn, she shared small details about her own life, the moments she had loved, the times she had struggled, and the experiences that had shaped her. He listened with patience, never interrupting, and occasionally asking thoughtful questions. She noticed how attentive he was, how every word she spoke seemed to matter to him. That attention made her feel valued, understood, and safe, feelings she hadn't realized she had been craving so deeply. After a while, they reached a clearing that overlooked a small frozen stream. The ice reflected the bright sky above, and the surrounding trees stood tall like sentinels. She gasped softly at the beauty of it all, and he chuckled quietly, pleased to see her delight. "It's incredible," she whispered. "I've never seen anything like this." He nodded, leaning against a tree and folding his arms. "It's peaceful," he said. "That's why I come here when I need to think." She approached him, brushing snow from her coat. "Can I sit with you?" "Of course," he said. She perched on a fallen log nearby, letting the quiet wash over them. For a while they simply sat, listening to the wind in the trees and the occasional creak of branches weighed down by snow. She felt a sense of connection not just to him, but to the world around them, a connection that made her feel grounded and calm. After some time, the bride decided to test the frozen stream. Carefully, she stepped onto the ice, her hands out for balance. It held her weight, solid and reliable, and she laughed with relief. He joined her, taking her hand to guide her across safely. They moved slowly, careful not to slip, but the laughter and trust between them made the moment feel light and joyful. "See," he said with a smile, "I told you it was strong." She smiled back, squeezing his hand. "I believe you now." The walk back to the cabin was quiet, comfortable. They didn't need to speak much. The trust they shared was enough. But as they reached the cabin, she paused and looked at him. "I think I understand now," she said softly. "Why you're so steady, so calm. It's because you've had to learn patience and strength. Not just physical, but everything else." He met her gaze, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "Life out here teaches you a lot. You can't rush things. You have to wait, watch, and sometimes just let things happen." She nodded, understanding more than ever that love might require the same lessons. Patience, trust, and quiet strength were as important as passion or excitement. She realized that their relationship wasn't about grand gestures. It was about moments like this, shared, simple, honest. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, They prepared dinner together. It was a simple meal of roasted vegetables and fresh bread, but every action carried care. She chopped vegetables while he stirred the pot, their movements in sync without effort. She felt a sense of comfort and intimacy that was new to her, a realization that love wasn't only spoken in words. It was shown in small, consistent acts. After dinner, they sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets. The bride felt a warmth beyond the fire, a warmth that came from knowing she was understood and accepted. The cowboy noticed her quiet mood and brushed a strand of hair from her face, a small gesture of affection. "You're different now," she said quietly, almost to herself. "More present, more open." He glanced at her, curiosity in his eyes. "I'm trying," he said softly. "I think I've always needed someone to make me see that life isn't just about being alone, that it's okay to lean on someone." She reached for his hand and held it firmly. "Then you found that," she said, "with me." He gave a small smile, and the corners of his eyes crinkled, showing the rare but genuine warmth that she had come to cherish. "Yes," he admitted. "I think I have." Later, as the night deepened, they moved to the small bedroom. The bride leaned against him, feeling his steady presence beside her. Sleep came slowly, but it was peaceful. She thought about the day, the walk, the laughter, the quiet moments, and realized how much she had learned about him, about herself, and about love. The cowboy, in turn, reflected on the bride's courage and openness. She had shared pieces of herself without fear, trusting him completely. He realized that love wasn't about control or certainty. It was about respect, trust, and being willing to face fears together. He felt a quiet pride not just in her but in himself, for finally allowing himself to be vulnerable. The night passed quietly. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white and softening every sound. Inside, two hearts were learning to beat in sync, learning that love was patient, understanding, and steady. They had faced the quiet of the day together, and in doing so had taken another step toward the life they were beginning to build. The bride woke briefly in the middle of the night, noticing the way he was still awake, staring at the window. "Thinking?" she asked softly. "Watching," he replied. "The snow, the quiet. It reminds me that things don't always have to be loud to matter." She nodded, understanding perfectly.
I like it, she whispered.
"Being here with you." He turned slightly to look at her, his eyes reflecting the soft moonlight. "I like it too," he said. "Being here with you, it makes me feel whole." They returned to sleep, holding on to the comfort they had found in each other. The night carried them gently, as if acknowledging the quiet bond that had grown stronger with every shared moment. By the time morning came again, they were no longer just two individuals sharing space. They were a team, learning the rhythm of trust, patience, and care. Each day brought new lessons, small victories, and growing understanding. They were not perfect, but they were present. And in the snowy isolation of the cabin, surrounded by silence and nature, they were exactly where they needed to be. The morning sun rose slowly over the snow-covered forest, casting a soft golden light through the cabin windows. The world outside looked peaceful, almost magical, as if time had paused for a moment. The bride awoke first, as was her habit, and found the cowboy already awake, sitting by the window and staring at the view. He looked thoughtful, calm, and content, and for a moment she watched him quietly, letting the serenity of the scene fill her with warmth. She stretched and wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, moving over to sit beside him. "Thinking again?" she asked softly, a small smile on her lips. He turned to her and smiled faintly. "Always. But not about work or trouble. Just us. This life. The quiet moments." She nodded, understanding him perfectly. She realized that the quiet moments, these simple, unremarkable minutes, were the ones that mattered most. They revealed the heart of a person, the core of love and trust. And in the quiet of this cabin, with snow falling softly outside, she felt the strength of their bond more than ever. Breakfast was simple, oatmeal, fruit, and warm tea, but it carried a sense of comfort and togetherness. They moved naturally around the small kitchen, preparing the meal together without rushing. The bride noticed how effortless it was to work alongside him. There was no competition, no need to prove herself, only cooperation and mutual respect. It was a lesson she had never fully understood before. Love was built in the everyday moments, the small gestures, and the willingness to care for one another without expectation. After breakfast, he suggested they take one last walk before the snow melted. She agreed eagerly, enjoying the crisp morning air. As they stepped outside, the snow glistened under the rising sun, and the trees looked like they had been sprinkled with silver. Every step they took left prints behind, a temporary mark of their presence in a vast, quiet world. As they walked through the forest, they talked about the past few days, the nights spent by the fire, the walks through the snow, the shared meals, and the quiet moments in the cabin. They laughed over small memories, teasing each other lightly, but always with care. She realized that this laughter, gentle and easy, was the sound of comfort and trust growing between them. At one point they reached a small hill overlooking the valley below. The view was breathtaking. The snow stretched endlessly, broken only by the dark green of pine trees and the frozen silver of streams. She stood in awe, taking it all in, while he stood beside her, his presence steady and grounding. "It's beautiful," she whispered, echoing words she had said before but feeling them more deeply this time. "Yes," he replied, "it is. But it's better with someone to share it with." She turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "I'm glad it's you," she said softly. "I couldn't imagine sharing it with anyone else." He gave a small, rare smile, and she saw the depth of emotion in his eyes. "Neither could I," he admitted. "These past few days, they've changed me. Made me realize that life doesn't have to be just work, responsibility, or solitude. It can be something more, something shared." The bride reached for his hand, holding it gently. "We've both changed," she said, "not just because of each other, but because we've learned what matters. Patience, trust, kindness, and love. Real love." He squeezed her hand in return, his grip firm and reassuring.
Yes, and that's what we have now.
A beginning. A chance to keep learning together. As they walked back toward the cabin, the bride noticed how the light had shifted. The sun was higher, casting long shadows across the snow. She realized that this moment, this life, was fragile and precious, and she wanted to remember it forever. She felt a quiet determination to cherish it, to nurture it, and to protect the bond they had formed. Back inside, they prepared lunch together. She chopped vegetables, while he stirred a pot of soup. The movements were easy and natural, almost automatic. Yet in each small gesture, there was meaning. They were learning each other's rhythms, anticipating needs, and finding joy in simple cooperation. She realized that love was less about grand gestures and more about shared daily life, the ability to face challenges together, and the quiet moments of care. After lunch, they sat by the fire once again, wrapped in blankets. The bride rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his steady heartbeat. They didn't speak much, but the silence was comfortable, full of understanding and shared experience. She realized that this comfort, the sense of being completely safe with someone, was rare and valuable. "You know," she said softly after a long pause, "I was scared before we came here. Scared of marrying, of change, of everything. But now, I feel ready. Ready for life with you, whatever it brings." He turned slightly to look at her, his eyes warm. "I felt the same. I've always been cautious. Maybe too cautious.
But you've taught me to trust.
To believe that life can be gentle, even in its challenges." She smiled, feeling tears threaten to rise. "We'll face it together," she said firmly. "Whatever comes, we face it together."
The cowboy nodded, his expression serious but soft.
Yes, together. As the afternoon passed, they prepared for the night. They moved around the cabin, tidying, stacking firewood, and making sure everything was ready for the coming winter nights. There was a sense of harmony in their actions, a rhythm that had developed naturally over the past few days. Each task, no matter how small, felt meaningful because it was done together. That evening, the bride suggested they sit outside for a while, despite the cold. They wrapped themselves in blankets and stepped onto the small porch, the snow crunching beneath their boots. The sky was painted in shades of purple and pink, and the forest seemed to glow with the last light of day. They sat together in silence, watching the snow fall and listening to the quiet. The bride felt a deep sense of peace, a rare feeling of being exactly where she belonged. She realized that love wasn't always about passion or excitement. It was about connection, trust, and the courage to face life together, no matter what came. He noticed her gaze and turned to her. "You look happy," he said softly. "I am," she admitted. "I feel complete. Like we started something real, something lasting." He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "That's what I hoped for," he said. "Not just a marriage, but a life. A life we build together with patience, trust, and love." She leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his presence against the cold air. "We can do it," she whispered. "I know we can." The night grew darker, and the stars began to appear in the clear sky. The snow reflected the starlight, creating a sparkling landscape that felt almost magical. They remained outside, wrapped in blankets, talking quietly about hopes, dreams, and the life they wanted to create together. Eventually, they returned to the cabin. The fire was low but warm, casting a soft glow across the room. They settled together, the bride resting against him once more. The cowboy held her, feeling the weight of responsibility, love, and trust. He realized that life had changed in a way he had never expected, and for the first time, he welcomed the change fully. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being you, for letting me in, for everything." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Thank you," he replied, "for trusting me, for being brave enough to share your life with me." The night passed peacefully, filled with quiet conversation, gentle laughter, and shared reflection. They slept wrapped in blankets, their hearts beating in rhythm, a symbol of the connection they had built. Outside, the snow continued to fall, silent and serene, covering the world in white. Inside, two hearts had found a home in each other. The next morning, the bride woke to find him already awake, staring out at the sunrise. She watched him for a moment, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Life had brought them together, through challenges and choices, and now they had something rare: trust, respect, and love that was steady and enduring. She approached him quietly, taking his hand.
"Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied, turning to smile at her.
"Ready for whatever comes next?" She nodded, squeezing his hand.
Yes.
Together. And in that quiet, snowy cabin, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the comfort of each other, they understood that life's greatest gift was not just love, but the willingness to face it with patience, trust, and an open heart. The past, with all its fears and doubts, seemed distant. The future was unknown, but they would meet it side by side, stronger and more connected than ever before. They stepped outside once more, taking in the fresh air and the sparkling snow. Every step they took together was a promise, silent, unspoken, but profound. A promise to trust, to care, and to face life together no matter what it brought. And as the sun rose higher, illuminating the forest in its golden light, they walked hand in hand, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives, hearts full of hope, love, and the quiet strength they had discovered in each other.